Hello, everyone. Heiko from Germany here. Let's quickly go into a short intro so you know who's speaking here. Yeah, Heiko Hert has been with SoftwareOne since more than 5 years now, working in the DACH region in the Azure team as a principal consultant and architect. I've done several things in my history, starting as a trainer where I gave about 8 years trainings in Microsoft technology, then was a head of IT in a company and stuff like that. Being an MVP since 2015, I think. Tomorrow is MVP Summit. Great. So I'm already living in another time zone. So right now I would be sleeping usually in the US, but here I'm giving the talk to you. Beside that, I'm having a YouTube channel full of Azure videos in case you want to watch some of them. They're in German because that's what the subscribers and also Microsoft is requesting. I'm having a blog and speaking on conferences, stuff like that. Yeah, have a family, being a major in the German Army Reserve, and I'm loving to go into my garage, basement, shop, whatever, doing woodworking. So having real things that you can touch, not just digital content being created by the end of the day. So that's what I love to do, to have just something to do different than just sitting in front of a computer. All right, so that's it about me. Let's dive into today's topic. So it's about monitoring, and first I try to get you a little bit into the issues and topic here. And some of these things might be a little bit, let's say, sarcastic, but yeah, just take them as they are. So I hear a lot of customers, and usually there's always the same ways of how they think about the cloud. So I would say, if you're in the cloud, you still need monitoring. Although moving to the cloud is a big impact on responsibilities and who is doing what, you still want to take care of that. Although the cloud provider is doing a lot of operational aspects, like they're providing maybe the backup for you, or they're providing toolings for update management, stuff like that, you still want to be on top of that and knowing what's going on there. Why is it happening? What can I do? What happened here and there? Are my things running? And at the end, for example, if you want to use the credit benefits that you can get from the SLAs, where Microsoft is reimbursing you when something goes wrong, you need to prove, you need to know it was off. So you want to know it was off in a certain time for a certain duration. Otherwise, you won't get any credits back. So that's why it's still super important. But it might change how it's done. It's maybe not the same way it's done in a on-prem environment. If we would stick to virtual machines in Azure and have an environment that's based on which VMs only, and I have a lot of customers doing that, then the cloud is just another another data center, and you can use the VM monitoring you used before, so you don't need to change that, although you might still need to add some other things. But the more we are going into the PaaS services, like app services, databases and stuff, the more we also need to change the way we are doing the monitoring, because our on-prem traditional tools are usually not capable of monitoring these services, or at least they don't have, let's say, full coverage of what you could monitor there. So I have a couple of phrases, so to say, that I want to bring and then want to talk about what to do with that. So number one, and I know that there's a lot of developers here, that's why I also tried to have that a little bit developer focused, not IT pro focused too much. And one thing you might ask is, I need to see what happened. Give me the log files. So on the traditional server, you would just SSH or RDP into that server and then just get the log file. But what if that application isn't running on a server, on a traditional server, but it's maybe an app service, it's maybe a static web app, it's running in a Spring Boot app, it's running in containers whatsoever, and you cannot RDP or SSH into that server. And that's what is taken care of by the Azure Log Analytics service, covered by something called Log Analytics Workspace, being part of the Azure Monitor suite of services. And I want to show you a lot of demos today, so that's why let's dive into here. And the first thing I want to show you is the Azure Monitor. And if you just go into the portal and then just type monitor here, it takes you where I am right now in the Azure Monitor, which is a suite of different services under one cover, so to say. And here you would also find the logs. Now, when using the logs from the Azure Monitor itself, it would show you a lot of logs depending on what scope is selected here. That scope is usually either a single application or a single resource, or it is a log analytics workspace. And in case I'm selecting a log analytics workspace here, it will get me all the logs that are in that workspace, regardless from where they are coming from. So as you can see, I could select just a workspace here, and that would give me the logs from that workspace. But if I only need the logs of a particular resource, it might be too complicated going through the monitor and then selecting the right scope here. It is an option, sometimes a better option, to go into the service or the resource itself. So in my case, I opened up a web app, and then in the list of brackets you can see here, there is one point down here called monitoring, where we also find the logs. Now in that case, actually we get the same screen, but you can see that a scope is already selected, and it is the service that I'm in right now. So that's why it's easier to find the logs for that service. And the other thing is, when searching for a service, let's say I'm selecting the log analytics workspace. Let's take that one down here. Come on. Now, if I'm looking for a particular log, let's just take heartbeat. That's the one that's there all the time. It would get me all the heartbeats of all the VMs reporting into that log analytics workspace. The query syntax allows me easy filtering, but I would need to filter. But if I'm in the service itself, whatever I put here is only giving me the results for this particular resource, although the data is still coming from that log analytics workspace. So it's just a quicker and already filtered way of getting logs for the service when I know what service I need the logs for. And then for this case, where it's a web app running web apps, in that case, it's running a simple PHP-based WordPress. I can, for example, use the HTTP logs. This is special for the web apps. If that would be a database, I would see different tables containing different types of logs, but still I have the logs here. In that case, I can see that someone, maybe me, opened up that web page a couple of times right before that meeting from all over the world. So we can see from the IP addresses that it's from all over the world. And we can also see how long that took and a couple of other things. We can even open up those logs and get all the details. We can see the console logs, the platform logs if needed. We can see the Azure activity that giving me the information who changed something here. I haven't changed anything in the last 24 hours, but I might. No. Okay. In that case, I will show you that later because that's part of another demo where I'm showing you the activity log. So that is the log. What is important to know is the log isn't there by itself. To get that log, you need something that's called the diagnostic settings. And usually they are just put on a subscription and then just get inherited down to the services. So in that case, it is on my subscription. And this diagnostic setting is then sending whatever I configure here into a log analytics workspace. I could also send the access audit log, giving me a lot of information. Keep in mind that log analytics workspace is a paid service, and it's paid by the amount of data you're sending in. It's called ingestion, and it has a gigabyte price of €2 something, about €2.50. per gigabyte. So it's expensive if you would just blow in all the audit logs that you might have. So, but now how about our app is running slow? We need more power. But is that really the reason? Is it slow? What's happening? Now, if it would be a VM, we'd just go into that VM and then, I don't know, PSAux, HTOP, Task Manager, something like that, and just checking CPU stats, memory, maybe disk IOPS, network throughput, things like that. But again, if it's not a VM, bad day, but not in Azure, because here we can use something that's called the metrics. Again, you would find that either in the Azure Monitor, going into the metrics, so that's the monitor again, now selecting the service I want to get the metrics for, or already selecting the Azure resource. In that case, it's not the web app, it's the plan behind it, because the resources are taken from that plan. If I would open up the metrics for the app itself, I would see them, but I would see different metrics. I would not see any performance-based metrics, but I would see things like sessions, requests, things like that. But now here in the plan, I can see things like the CPU percentage. And now it tells me that, no, that app has enough power because at least throughout the last 24 hours, we never hit 50%. We are always below. We can change the max or the aggregation to max. Now you can see that, okay, it was slightly above 50. If I remove the cursor from that screen down here, it gives me a number. In this case, it's 51. That is the maximum, because that's my aggregation, during last 24 hours. I could change the time range. For example, give me like last 30 days, or take 7. Now it would change the grid. In that case, it changed it to 30 minutes grid. So like every step is 30 minutes. But I could change that back into like 5 minutes or even 1 minute. Sometimes it would give me a warning. Like in that case, I selected a very large time frame with a very small grid. That could take time. And maybe it doesn't really help me because now I have something that I can't really see. In that case, it might be helpful to move into a scatter chart to see where the major number of the dots is. In that case, it's still too much, but I can zoom. Like I can just drag and drop here and zoom in, and I can even zoom in more, or I can use whatever chart I want to use. But I can see that the majority of those dots is below 35% in the max, meaning that there should be enough performance for this service. We could also put an alert on that. I will talk about that later. We can also see the metrics for a couple of services. So, for example, let's go back into the Azure Monitor, selecting a whole subscription, telling it, I want to see, let's say, virtual machines in that subscription in West Europe. And now I would get, for example, again, percentage CPU, where is it? Here it is. For all the VMs that have reported this type of data in the given time frame. So in my case, I have 4 VMs that have reported their CPU consumption. You can see that all of them have been turned off during the night. That's why they have these dotted lines here. So someone yesterday in the evening, they were shut down. This morning, they were booted up again. And I can see their data. When moving here, you can see down there, it's changing the numbers. That's always where I have my cursor on. I can also highlight one of them either by going here or by moving on one of these charts, so I can see them more, let's say, bold than the other ones to have a better view on that. I could also add new charts below the current chart. Like, let's say I want to see maybe memory. You would not put memory in the same chart because one is percent, the other one would be kilobytes, megabytes, whatever. This would not work out well, although it would technically, it works, but the grid would be wrong. But now if I want to have something in a second chart, like memory or things like that, I could just put that here, like availability, for example. It's just 0 to 1. That also works in that way. So that is the metrics. But if it's not the performance, why is my app running slow? What's happening inside the app? Maybe it's bad SQL statements or something like that. And that is what brings us into the application insights. Back into the monitor, we would have a whole insights chapter here that has a lot of insights for different types of services, like for applications, VMs, stuff like that. But again, it might be easier to just go into that application, and then from that application, I can open up the application insights of that application once it's enabled. So that's a service you need to enable. It's not there all the time. You need to enable that. And depending on what type of service it's below, you even might need to adjust your service. Like in that case, the service behind is a app service, and it needs something that's called a instrumentation key or the connection string to send data into the application inside. And in that case, there is a environment variable in the app service telling it to send the data there. So in that case, I would also need to adjust the app slightly. Now, depending on the tech stack that is behind here, I get different levels of detail. So first thing I get here is I can see what happened in that application throughout a period of time here. That's a very infrequent used application. That's just one request here. But now we can go down here into a few things, like one is the live metrics. So if I go into the live metrics, it takes a few seconds, or isn't even connected here. Okay, that's bad, but it's not a problem. I will show you that in the other thing. We can see transactions, like what was going on in that application. Someone requested a page here, and we can see, okay, loading the page from the app took about a second. We can also see where the request came from. That's like where I'm living and a few other things. We can see the responses, and we can go through what happened on that application. Now, in that case, it's a PHP application. That's not so good because PHP isn't really covered by the support of application insights, although there is a third-party framework you could use. But if I switch into an application that's .NET based, and I mean, obviously that's a Microsoft technology that is ways more supported here, I can see a lot of things. Like, let's go into the live metrics. It takes 10 seconds to load. While that's loading, I will send out about 200 requests against that application. And then where I'm here, we should see, yep, there it is, request rate going up, incoming requests going up, things like that. Like, that is live. Like, it's happening right now. So we can see that. I can do things in my app. I can test to click a button and see what impact it has on the performance of that application, for example. We can see, let's just start with the application map. We can see what other services are attached to this service. In that case, it's a very simple to-do list app, MVC-based, using a SQL database behind to send the to-dos I'm writing into a database. And now we can see there is my app, and there is a database behind it that is used by that app, and they have a very low latency of about 2.2 milliseconds, so that's like the ping into that database. We can see that there was a given number of calls throughout the last time, and we can even dive in more here. Like, we can open up the apps or the services being attached, and we can see the logs there, and we can investigate performance, and a lot of things can happen here. I mean, this is a simple app. Just imagine an app consisting of more than just one app part and one database part. You would also see the whole metro map here. I think one of the best things here is the transaction, because now I can see what's really going on. And I don't only see the requests that are going on here, but I can also see, like in that case, someone sent a select statement against the database because he opened up the to-dos, the index of the to-dos on the web app. Getting the web page took 12 milliseconds. Getting data from the database took another millisecond. That's the SQL statement that was used. So that is really insights into that app. I know what it's doing. I know, like, the page it's calling. Down here, I can even see a lot more, like what's the request, what's the response code, what's the time it took, the URL it was calling, all these things. For each single call I made, like all these 200 calls I made, you can see there was about 1.5K calls in the last 24 hours because I did a lot of simulation yesterday already to just have data here that I can show you today. There's a couple of other things here. Another one I want to show is failures. I just cut off the database connection yesterday evening. So in that case, it wasn't able to talk to the database anymore until I allowed the database connect again. So we can see that here. You can see what's going on and other things. And we can also set up smart detection where it is detecting errors and stuff. In that case, this is a .NET 4 based application. It's already a little bit old. I don't have the whole features that I would get with like a .NET Core 6 or something application, but it's already there. So a great thing. So something might be wrong with my application. Maybe it's not starting anymore or whatever. Something might have been changed, but who did that? Who changed my application? And I had a call this morning with a customer, really interesting, where we optimized this environment and there was something that shouldn't be there. And then one guy of that customer said, I don't know what it is. It wasn't me. So guess what? We checked the logs. It was him. And that's a great thing. Azure knows who did what. It's not asking people. It's just taking a look into that log. There is by default something called the activity log. And you will find that in each single service you will call, but you also find that in the resource groups, management groups, subscriptions, so in all these scopes. And it is there by default. You cannot change it. You cannot delete it. It's kept for 30 days. After the 30 days, the data will be gone unless you set up to export the data. And that's what I do here, sending the data again by using a diagnostic setting into either a log analytics workspace, a storage account, a event hub, whatever you want to use. But as I said, by default, it's here free 30 days. So if I extend the period here, I can see that a lot of things have been changed. And I can also see who did that. Like there is a name behind here. There is a few things that is done by the platform. Like the platform is checking the health of a service frequently. So there is no user here. But a lot of my things are done by my automation account because there is VMs you've seen that in one of the graphs. They are starting in the morning, being shut down in the evening. It's done by a user account called Azure Automation 1. But there's also things either someone else has done or up here, that's something I have done, for example. So I've changed the policy here. So we can see that. And not just on, as I said, on the resource group, but also on each service, we will have that activity log. So this gives us information when something happened, can open that up. We can see what was done in detail, and I can even open that up again. I can see the JSON that was used to call the API to do that change. And in here, there's a lot of details, although it looks a little bit unsorted, but there's a lot of details in here, like what IP address, what user account, what's the service, what call, what payload was used in that call, all these things. Plus, there is a change history, like what did I change? And you can see I changed a lot. I mean, this was my purpose to show you today, but you can see that what did I change a day ago, and what is the values here. That works great if I know where something was changed. But if we don't know where it was changed, or we need all the changes, it might be a tricky thing to go just through the activity log. There's something even better than that. And that is inside the Azure Monitor, something that's called change analysis. Now that change analysis gives me, as it says, all the changes throughout the last max of 2 weeks. So that is not 30 days. It's maximum 2 weeks. And by default, it's only giving me important and normal changes. I could also enable the noisy changes here. So it would give me a lot of things I might not want to see because there's just a status change, or in that case, just a timestamp that was changed. I don't really want to see that. But other than that, I can again see my changes, like a VM, for example, was started. In that case, we can see it is from the status of starting, it went into the status of running. And so a couple other things have changed, like the disk was used by that VM then, or the app service change we have seen. Let's see where that is. There's a lot of things I've done yesterday. What's yesterday? This is today. More results. Give me more. Still today. Little. Okay, here we go. So I've changed, for example, a SKU of a database. I have, for example, deallocated something. I should have changed, where is that? Something in the Java version. Oh, it's too much. Find it too fast. But I guess you see my point. So all the changes are here. I can even filter that if needed. So I can filter it down to a subscription, a resource group, whatever needed. And I get the changes. I get the old and the new values for them. And I can even open up those lines. Like, let me go down back to the one where I changed the SKU here. Now I get the change details, like the values. Again, who did that change? When did it happen? And I can see things that might be attached to that change. They are put here again. So a lot of things, and then just all my changes. Great thing. Where's my PowerPoint? Here it is. So now let's imagine my servers cannot communicate, or maybe my past services. Maybe I have a Azure SQL database, and I have a app service. They need to talk because app service wants to get data from the database. What can I do? How could I analyze what's going on here? I mean, surely I can call the network guys and blame them, but maybe there's easier ways. And there is, because there's something called the Network Watcher. It's not really part of the Azure Monitor. It's a service being provided automatically once you deploy something network related in any subscription or any region. And in my case, you see that I have these network watchers being deployed for every region I'm using in any of my subscriptions. It's a little bit noisy, but that's how it is. But you do not need to mess with these resources. They are just there. Just ignore them. We go into the sorry. When you go into the Network Watcher, and that's where I am already, there's a couple of diagnostic tools down here. And there is things where I can do, for example, the next hop. It is analyzing how is my routing working. Like what's the next hop from one service into a given destination, for example. We can see NSG diagnostics, IP flow verify, a lot of things. But there's also something that's just called connection troubleshoot. Now, I want to know, and I need to look up what VMs I want to use here in my slide. Now, I just need to put a few data here. Like, what's the virtual machine I want to treat as a source, and I could change that. It doesn't need to be a virtual machine. It could also be like an app gateway, for example. And by the way, if I would not use connection troubleshoot, but IP flow verify, I could also just put an IP address. But this is just easier here. So now my sourcing thing should be the VM number 2. And my destination, and I can show you here that VM number 2, that's a web server again. In that case, it's a Linux-based LAMP stack web server. I think that's also a WordPress or something running. It cannot talk to whatever is behind. So timeout, it's what I get here. So now I need to check why it cannot talk to VM number 1, which is running the database for that. And I can say what is the ports I want to take a look on. In that case, it's 3306 because that's the MySQL port. And I could just put any sourcing port here. I don't even need to put one. You can see there is no red asterisk here. I could put one if I want to. And I can say, what do I want to have in my test? And as you can see, it's mainly the combination of a lot of the other tests that I can get here. Now, once I've clicked that button, it will run those tests, and then it will pop up with the result of that, showing me whether the connection does work or whatever is the reason why it does not. So that takes a while, and we will just leave it running, and within the recording, I will also speed up the video a bit. So let's wait for the results. So now down here, it shows me the test result, and it says it's unreachable. It sent 30 probes, they are failing. So outbound communication was allowed, but then, and that's the reason, and as I told you, that's on purpose, the inbound NSG diagnostic says that that connection is denied, and it also gives me the reason. In that case, it's a particular NSG. Now I can click that, and it takes me to that NSG, and then in here, you can see that I denied that inbound communication on the specific 3306 port. It's currently denying. If I would remove that rule, then would reload my web page, it will show up again. There's other things I could do. I could do a packet capture. That's mainly what you might know being called Wireshark or a serial. It's mainly the same. You just tell it what's the VM you want to packet capture and the NIC you want to use. What is the storage you want to send your package capture in? Is there a time limit? Is there a maximum when you want it to stop, or should it just run until you hit the stop button manually? And then it would just write data into that storage account, and then you could just download that as a JSON file and would see all the packets that have been captured. It's a great thing, and it's free of charge, so you should use that. The connection monitor itself is more something like really monitoring that you could set up. Like in that case, I'm monitoring, there's 2 domain controllers based on Windows Server VMs, and I'm just monitoring whether they can talk LDAP with each other to make sure that they can replicate their domain controller data that they have. So in that case, I basically tell it that there is the 2 VMs, there is the ports I need to monitor, and then it's just doing it. And it's giving me like the failed checks. It's giving me round trip times, like if I would ping the target all the time. But it's not just a ping, it's a port ping because it's using the port I'm giving. And we can also see the diagram here a little bit, graphical. And if needed, I can create an alert. Like I want to see when there is no communication between my domain controllers. You can send me an email or something like that. Okay, I need to hurry up a little bit because time is running and I have a few more things I want to show. So now, how could I get an email if something is wrong or in a state I don't want it to be? Like, for example, give me an email if there is more than 100 requests on my web page within 5 minutes, because that is something I did not plan for, and I might need to increase performance, or maybe I need to block something because I don't want that much requests on my website, or also a lot of other different things, like give me an email when, for example, CPU usage of a service is below, 90% for more than 5 minutes. Or I don't know, things like that. So how could I do that? There's a couple of ways we could do that. First of all, in the Azure Monitor, there's a section called Alerts, where I could see the current alerts, like what was fired currently. You can even see the alerts that have already been resolved throughout the last, in that case, 24 hours. So there was 2 alerts being triggered by me yesterday evening and this morning, being affected to my demos app. And there's other things, they're already resolved, and the other ones are still let's say open. So they haven't been resolved yet. So how does that work? There is alert rules that are set up on a certain condition, on a certain scope, and then they have something being configured as an action. Like what should happen if that condition is met on that scope in a given time frame, stuff like that. Theoretically, I could create those rules from here. I don't do that. It's a hassle to go through that, let's say, wizard from here. It's way easier to just go to the, let's say, the sensor I want to have something for. Like, let's go to the app here, where I can see the CPU that we've seen before. And I want to get an email once that is above a certain percentage. Now from here, I could just click New Alert Rule. And basically, it's opening up the same wizard, but it's already pre-filled with the data I need. Like it has selected the scope. It's my app. It has selected the signal as the CPU percentage. It has selected what I used before. That was the maximum, although I could change that. And I can say, okay, give me a threshold of 50%. Now, in that case, you can see it would have hit that once over the last 6 hours, because once it was above 50. Let's go into 20, a lot of red dots. So that might not be a good value because we would trigger that alert very frequently. Or I could say 80%, haven't triggered that yet. I need to tell him how often it should check and what's the look back period. Like check every 5 minutes and then take the data from the last 5 minutes to see if something was above 80. I could change that in both directions, making it more or less, although those two values are coupled. So I cannot say check every 15 minutes, but then look back 5 minutes. So I need to raise that to 50 minutes again, because otherwise I would miss 10 minutes. I could do it the other way around. I could say look back every 15 minutes for 30 minutes in the past. That works. I could add more conditions. So I can say I have another condition, like I want to see not only CPU, but maybe number of sessions, things like that. Now, then the next step is I'm given an action. There's either quick actions, that's in preview. That's mainly I want to send an email. But there's also action groups that's there for years already. These action groups could either be a notification that is mainly email, SMS, or push to the app. You need just put mail addresses here or the email account of the app user. Be aware that using SMS, text messages, or even voice is applied by charges, so you will have to pay for that. Or you could say, I don't want to put an email address. I just want to send an email to whoever is contributor on the affected resource. So that is more dynamic. You could even say whoever is reader. Be aware that it's based on those roles, just those. If someone has a custom role that has the same rights as a reader, he would not get that email. So that's why a little bit tricky here. The other thing you can do with an action group is we can send or we can do real actions. So we can trigger a webhook, for example. We can trigger a logic app or an Azure function. We can start a automation runbook. So let's assume that our application is on high a session count and high CPU percentage. You could just trigger a function that's booting up a second VM for it, for example. So very easy things. And for example, with logic apps, you can also do low-code, no-code things here to have those things happening. I can also say, I don't want to see a alert. I just want to have it in the portal. So that's also an option. Those alerts work in various places. Like here, that's the metrics where I can create a alert. I can also go into my, into my logs. And let's say there was a web app in the HTTP log, we get the status code. Like, where is it? Here, SC status. So usually it should be 200. But maybe I want to see a message or an email when SC status is not 200. So this is the query first in Log Analytics in KQL. should give me some response here. Like that's when like yesterday when I stopped the database connection, I got a lot of errors here. Now, based on that, I can create a new alert rule. And here I get, again, my conditions being pre-filled. So it's a custom log search. Here's my query I had. I could just adjust same as before. I could just adjust the parameters here. And then again, I can do my action. Now, the great thing is I can extend the scope. It's true for queries, for metrics, all those things. I can see, like, I still have that open. Let's see. No, too bad. I could say, give me that on all my VMs, or give me that on all my app services. So I don't need to create that alert for each single app. Now, in my case, I have set up, where is it? I set up the too much browser tabs here. I set up a alert for whenever my Azure Monitor's demo app has a request count of 100 or above. And as I said, through that test, I'm sending in about 200 requests. So guess what happened? I got an email telling me that the alert was triggered because I had more than 100 requests within 5 minutes. And I get all the details here, like what's the subscription ID, what's the resource ID, where it happened. I get the metrics that was taken a look on, and what is the value when it triggered that thing. So in that case, the threshold was above 135 in that case. So how about dashboard? There's a couple of dashboard options, but maybe you want to have a dashboard you might be familiar with already, and you might have seen it in one of my browser tabs. I have Grafana here. There is a service called Managed Grafana in Azure, where you get a managed instance of Grafana being deployed. You don't need to take care of any infrastructure for that. You just need to pay for it, obviously. And then in that Grafana instance, you can do whatever you could do in a Grafana instance. So you can add, for example, a lot of dashboards that are provided by the community. Like all these dashboards I'm showing you here, I've added them within seconds just by fetching them from a community repo. So I haven't built any of these dashboards by myself. It's super fast. The deployment of the Grafana is super fast, and then using it is maybe even faster. So that is, for example, a dashboard giving me insights on my VMs, where I can see things like CPU usage, memory, network, stuff like that. Or we can get the data for for the VMs in a resource group aggregated. So it's not just one VM; it's a couple of them. Or we can see our application insights data. Like this is the demo app. We have triggered the test before, and you can see there is the user count and requests, response time. Everything is here in that dashboard being provided. I don't need to do anything. Or in that case, it's my database. It's giving me the sessions that are going on here and a lot of things. So great thing to be used as a dashboard solution. Although there is different other solutions you can have. One is there is a couple of workbooks. Some of them are provided by Azure or by Microsoft itself. Other ones can be fetched from community repos. And again, we have a lot of things that are here by themselves, like virtual machine key metrics. I could just open that up, and whatever I selected here is my filter. And I can see, in that case, for example, the key metrics for a bunch of my VMs. There is a ton of these workbooks, and they don't always have to be super fancy graphical. I also have written one by myself that's giving me just an overview of an environment, like what is all my subscriptions and the offer behind it. Do I have any classic resources? That's mainly a resource graph query. I can see if there is any reservations. We can see the virtual machine sizes being used. All those things I can just put here, and all the data that we get here is just fetched either by log analytics, the resource graph, or by using the metrics of a VM. So the data is just there. I just need to use it. And then there is the real dashboards. That's really called a dashboard. That's a easy one I've created. That's just an inventory dashboard. So not so much to change here over the time. So it's giving me like top resources and counts and stuff. But I can also a change into another dashboard that I've prepared where I just have a lot of these graphs and tables and all those things. And the great thing about these dashboards is you can easily change them. And I can just drag and drop, or I can increase, I can add new widgets here that I want to see. And I can share those dashboards, meaning that whoever has access to the resource, because a dashboard is just a resource at the end, could also open up that dashboard, seeing the same data than me. And as it has an auto refresh option, I can also put that on a big screen or something to see the data of my environment all the time and then see when something is going on. So there's plenty of dashboard options that we can use through either Azure Monitor itself or Grafana. For the Grafana option, just to show you that, if I go into the Azure Monitor, down here, I get the Azure Managed Grafana, where I could create a new instance of it, or in my case, already have one. If I click that, I also get the URL where the Grafana instance is running in, and then I could just use it from there. And it's pre-connected to Azure if I deploy it through that way. So I would deploy my own Grafana instance. I would need to hook it up into my Azure environment to allow it to get the data. If I use the managed Grafana, it's using a service principal that's auto-created, and then using that service principal to get the data I want to see there. Now, worst case, my app is down. Is it me? Is it Azure? Is other ones also affected? What's going on? And again, the Azure Monitor has an answer for me. And that is, let's go back into the monitor. And that's called the service health. That's here, where I first get issues, known issues, that I might be affected. Currently, it's only showing me my services, but I could also see all the other issues. To see that, you need to be a reader, nothing more. What's more important, I would say, is I can see plant maintenances here. Like, when is something happening that might affect the uptime of my environment? And in that case, they're doing a maintenance on one of my flexible MySQL servers. Or they might update something on a hypervisor when a VM is rebooting, things like that. We can see advisories. If there is something where Microsoft says, maybe do this and that to increase the health of your application, I would see that here. Same for security. Then there is the health history, giving me what happened in the past where I was affected by. That's the things you might see in emails. If you are within a Azure subscription, you might also get some of these emails. And it's not only typical incidents, like in that case. It might also be things like a advisory, because I think this is a retirement. So classic application insights. It's retiring. So that was 2 days ago. That's why it's not in the health advisories anymore, but it's still here. And then there's the resource health, and that is, in our case, that's the thing we might need the most, because here I can see what's about my VMs or my other services. Like, I can see they are green. So Azure itself states that the VM is running, but it was red a while ago, and I can see the time. So maybe my problem, maybe it happened that time, was affected by Azure. I can see that from here. And the great thing is we can have alerts for that again, because we can create a health alert for the various types of alerts that might happen. I can select here, maybe I just want to have advisories, or I want to see the issues for what services, for what regions. And again, I can use either quick actions, action groups. It's always the same. It's an alert rule at the end, sending out either emails or things like that when things are happening. It's all here. And in most cases, like here, we can also download the PDFs where I can get the summary with all the things happened. We can see what services have been impacted. We can see what happened here by Microsoft. What did they after the issue was resolved? So this is the post-incident review. All these things are here. Yes, you can get some of these things outside the Azure portal. If you would just Google it, you would see that Microsoft is providing a services overview thingy on their Azure website. But here you get it affected by your environment. So you see what of your resources is affected by whatever outage, issue, whatever might have happened. Great thing. All right. That's it.